If you want to go hiking in Bryce Canyon National Park and are trying to figure out the best trails in the park, then you're in the right place. Because in today's episode, we're going to look at my picks for the 10 best hikes in Bryce Canyon National Park. Hi, I'm James Ian, and I've written numerous guides and published several itineraries for Bryce Canyon National Park. By sharing my favorite Bryce Canyon hikes, I'm going to help you choose the best trails for your own vacation. You'll know exactly what to expect so that you can easily curate your own hiking list. You'll have peace of mind that you won't accidentally miss out on an epic hike that you would have loved, and you also won't bite off more than you can chew. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe right now. If you're watching or listening somewhere else, follow my podcast to get the episodes as they come out. Bryce Canyon is most famous for the hoodoos, of course. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of these incredible sandstone pillars that are all crowded into bowl-like amphitheaters. It's just amazing. And many of the hikes go down among the hoodoos. Not all of them, though. There's more to the park than you may think. Be sure to stay to the end, where I'll be sharing my number one pick for the best hike in Bryce Canyon National Park, and it is amazing. Let's get started.
Welcome to National Parks Collecting with James Ian, the national park expert. He's here to help you have the best national parks trips ever. Get tips, discover hidden gems, and learn all you need to know. This is your path to collecting national parks experiences, memories, and maybe even a stamp or two.
So, what are the best hiking trails in Bryce Canyon National Park? Remember to stay to the end, where I'll be sharing the number one hike in the park. You will not want to miss it. If you're looking for an easy hike that goes down into the canyon itself, then the Queens Garden Trail is a great choice, as it's the least strenuous hike into Bryce Amphitheatre. The Queens Garden Trail goes from Sunrise Point to the Queen Victoria Hoodoo, and then if you're doing it as an out and back hike, you'll just hike back up again. The total distance is 0.9 miles each way, so 1.8 miles return. It has an elevation change of 357 feet, so it's rated as moderate, and it takes about 1 to 2 hours. The trailhead is at Sunrise Point, and the trail starts down a wide, not too steep trail with really great views of the hoodoos and ridges in the canyon. And then after about half a mile, it heads down a series of broad switchbacks and then turns right, descending along a ridge. There are plenty of really cool hoodoos here, and the path actually goes through 3 tunnels that are cut into sandstone fins across the trail, which is kind of cool. As you near the bottom of the amphitheater, you'll enter a ponderosa pine forest that provides a bit of a respite from the heat. And then at 0.9 miles, you'll come to a side spur trail. It's just 0.1 mile round trip, so definitely take it, because this goes right into the middle of Queen's Garden. Now, there are several hoodoos in the park that are named after what they supposedly look like, and one of them is the Queen Victoria Hoodoo, which is what Queen's Garden is named after. This supposedly looks like Queen Victoria standing in profile on top of a pedestal. Now, fortunately, there's a small sign nearby with a photo of Queen Victoria in a similar pose that will help you identify the hoodoo, and it kind of does look like it, actually. And then you can return the way that you came, or you can add on the Navajo Loop, which I'll talk about in just a moment. If you do it out and back, which is totally fine, the views are different each way, so it won't seem like you're doing the same trail twice. But if you're okay with some steep switchbacks, I do recommend combining it with the Navajo Loop, as it is a bit of a different hike and gives you a very different experience. Next up, another hike that is really awesome and super famous is the Navajo Loop Trail. If you've heard of the iconic Wall Street in Bryce Canyon, now the narrow section of Zion also has a Wall Street section, so the parks do kind of love New York a little bit, then this is the hike that has the Wall Street section. It's a moderate hike, even though there are some very steep switchbacks, so you might consider it strenuous. It's got a 550 feet elevation change, it's 1.3 miles, it takes about 1 to 2 hours. The trail is a tight loop that descends one narrow section with some switchbacks between walls of these colorful sandstone hoodoos, and then ascends through another narrow section with some more switchbacks between more of the hoodoos and the sandstone cliffs. Along the way, there are spectacular hoodoos, including perhaps the most famous hoodoo in the park, maybe in the world, which is Thor's Hammer. If you start at Sunset Point and hike clockwise, you'll pass Thor's Hammer in the first section before descending down the switchbacks on the Two Bridges side of the loop. There are wonderful views over towering Douglas fir trees here, and then near the bottom, you'll pass two narrow rock bridges that are wedged between cliff walls that give this side of the loop its name. At the bottom of the canyon is the junction with the Queens Garden Trail to the left and the Wall Street side of the loop to the right. As you ascend up the Wall Street side, the switchbacks here are even narrower, steeper, and more dramatic than the Two Bridges ones. Something to be aware of, though, is that the Wall Street side of the Navajo Loop is closed in winter, so the whole loop is only possible in summer. Most people tend to do the Navajo Loop in a counterclockwise direction, so they go down Wall Street and up Two Bridges. But I actually recommend, and the National Park Service also recommends, that you do it clockwise so that you go down Two Bridges and up Wall Street, which is what I described, because this way has the better views and it's also a bit safer. The top section of the Two Bridges Trail before the switchbacks has the best views in the park of the famous Thor's Hammer hoodoos. What's another trail in Bryce Canyon National Park? Well, this one is actually a combination of the two most famous trails, which is the Queens Garden Navajo Loop Combo Trail. This trail has a great combination of the spectacular open views and cool hoodoos on the Queens Garden Trail, and then the really dramatic switchbacks on the Navajo Loop Trail, except you'll only do one side of the loop. I recommend starting on the Queens Garden Trail, and so that starts at Sunrise Point. It has a 550 feet elevation change. In total, it's 2.9 miles. It is rated as moderate to strenuous and takes about 2 to 3 hours. Start down the Queens Garden Trail, and I've already kind of described that trail. But once you get to the Queen Victoria Hoodoo, then head back to the main trail and then continue another 0.8 miles until you get to a four-way junction. If you hear horses here, it is because the Horses Trail passes very near here, because one of the four trails goes on the Peekaboo Trail, which I'll talk about in a moment. For this hike, you'll hike back up one of the two sides of the Navajo Loop, which run roughly parallel to each other. So the hard right is the Two Bridges Trail, which is about 0.6 mile, and then the next trail on the right is the Wall Street section, which is 0.7 miles. Most people, if they're not hiking in winter when the trail is closed, do choose to go up the Wall Street section. This has the most dramatic switchbacks, although I have to say that the Two Bridges Trail does also have some steep and narrow switchbacks, so you'll enjoy it no matter which one you choose. The Wall Street section is a very narrow section between two sandstone walls that almost kind of seem to touch each other. It's the more famous of the two, but it is only open in summer. And if you take the Two Bridges Trail, you get to see those sandstone twin bridges that are kind of famous. Bryce Canyon is famous for hoodoos, of course, but it also has really large sandstone fins that the hoodoos start from, cliff walls and windows. So it's really cool to see some of these other features, which you see more on the Two Bridges side. The trail climbs some steep switchbacks, and then there's the best view in the park of Thor's Hammer, which is perhaps the most famous hoodoo in the park. You can't see that from the Wall Street side at all. And then at the end, you arrive at the rim at Sunset Point. You can then, if you want, take the Rim Trail from Sunset Point back to Sunrise Point to complete a full loop back to where you started. Most people do this hike in a counterclockwise direction because the steepest section is a descent, but I strongly recommend that you do the hike in the opposite direction, the clockwise direction, as I described. So that's going down Queens Garden and up the Navajo Loop Trail because it's safer, but also the views are better. You get the expansive views going down the Queens Garden Trail. I recommend it. Keep in mind that the Wall Street section is closed in winter, so if you're hiking this in winter, which you can do, wear microspikes because it can be snowy and icy, but then the Two Bridges is the only option. If the Wall Street section's open, I do recommend doing that just because it's kind of iconic. But if you climbed up Wall Street, when you get to the top of the rim at Sunset Point, it's totally worth going down the Two Bridges Trail just for a little bit. You might not want to go back down, but this top section, before you get to the switchbacks on the Two Bridges Trail, has the best views of Thor's Hammer Hoodoo. So I recommend doing that because it's worth seeing. Keep in mind that the switchbacks are very steep, but if you stop to take lots of photos, you'll have a chance to constantly catch your breath, and it's not too bad. Just take it slow. What's another trail in Bryce Canyon National Park? Well, another must-do hike is the Rim Trail. Most of the stunning views over the canyon are found here. This is rated as moderate. If you do the full trail, it's 3 to 5 hours. It's 5.5 miles each way from Fairyland Point to Bryce Point, and it has an elevation change of 1,587 feet. Although it's along the rim, it's more up and down than you think. You can either start at Bryce Point if you're doing the full rim, and you don't have to, but if you do the full rim trail, you start either at Bryce Point or at Fairyland Point. But of course, you can just hike part of the trail. There are some sections with fairly significant elevation change, so don't expect it to be flat, although there are some flat sections. And it can easily be broken into different sections that connect some of the best viewpoints of the hoodoos. So, if we start at Bryce Point, the first section is Bryce Point to Inspiration Point. This is 1.5 miles. It's closed in the winter. Bryce Point has a really great view of the Silent City, as the main amphitheater of the hoodoos is called. In addition to the hoodoos, you can also see some other features of the landscape, such as Aquarius Plateau and the sinking ship, so look out for them. The next section is from Inspiration Point to Sunset Point. This is 0.7 miles. The views from Inspiration Point is similar to Bryce Point, but the hoodoos are a bit closer so that you can see more details. Then from Sunset Point to Sunrise Point, we'll talk a little more about that as a separate hike in a moment. This section is paved and easy. Sunrise Point to Fairyland Point, the last 2.4 miles, is where there is significant elevation change, but also a lot fewer people around. I actually really like this section. It's very different from the rest. So some things to keep in mind. The section between Sunset Point and Sunrise Point is paved and mostly flat, so this is a really good section to walk if you prefer easy hikes. The national park also allows pets in this section only. If you don't want to hike the trail both ways, if you have 2 vehicles, then what you could do is park a vehicle at one end, split your group in half with half the group hiking each way. Alternatively, if the shuttle is running, you can start at Bryce Point and hike to Fairyland Point and then walk a mile or so down the paved Fairyland Road to the main road where you can flag down the shuttle. There isn't a shuttle stop there, but the shuttle buses will usually stop for you if you flag them down, as long as they're not full. You could also do this in reverse, in which case you would ask the shuttle bus to drop you off at the Fairyland Road spur, walk along the paved road to Fairyland Point, and then hike the Rim Trail from there to Bryce Point. But then you'll be hiking the Rim Trail uphill rather than downhill. What's an easy hike in Bryce Canyon National Park? This, one of the easiest and also one of the best hikes in the park, is the Rim Trail between Sunset Point and Sunrise Point. It connects 2 of the most iconic viewpoints in the park, and the elevation change is just 82 feet. It's about half an hour each way, 0.5 miles each way, so 1.1 miles return. And you can start either at Sunrise Point or at Sunset Point. You can hike it in either direction. The trail's really beautiful, and there are spectacular views of the hoodoos that crowd in the Bryce Amphitheater at the 2 viewpoints, but also along the way. There's benches along the way, so you can stop and relax. You can enjoy views pretty much the entire way. You can even take pets on this part, and it's wheelchair accessible. I do recommend trying to visit either at the sunrise or sunset to see the best light on the hoodoos and also to avoid some of the worst of the crowds. And although they're named Sunrise and Sunset Point, you can actually see the sunrise or sunset at either one of them. It doesn't really matter. I also recommend that you check the weather, as hail and lightning storms are not uncommon in the park, particularly in the afternoon, and walking on the rims can increase your risk. We are halfway through. Before we look at my other favorite hikes in Bryce Canyon National Park, if you're watching this on my @National Parks Collecting YouTube channel and you haven't already, please like and subscribe below. It really does help. Another really top hike that goes down into the valley and through the hoodoos is the Peekaboo Loop Trail. This is rated as moderate to strenuous. It's 3 to 4 hours. It's 5.2 miles in total with an elevation change of 670 feet. It starts at Bryce Point and descends through some switchbacks down into the canyon. There are expansive views of the canyon and loads of hoodoos in the early stages of the hike. And then, after the steep descent, the trail wanders along the canyon floor before climbing over a ridge to get back to the start of the loop. If you're hiking the loop through Peekaboo Canyon in a clockwise direction, you'll soon pass a horse corral. There's a watering trough there, and there are even pit toilets, which are only open in the summer. The trail passes directly beneath the wall of the windows before climbing through a kind of a labyrinth of hoodoos and then passing through a tunnel to the top of the ridge. And when you do that, the cathedral will be on your right. It then descends down some switchbacks to the far end of the Peekaboo Loop and the junction with the Navajo Trail. Continuing around the loop, the trail climbs out of Bryce Canyon to the top of the ridge. Along the way, you'll see Boat Mesa and Fairy Castle Rock and have expansive views of the top of the ridge of hoodoos and fins in Peekaboo Canyon. The trail zigzags down the ridge, goes through another tunnel, and then crosses Peekaboo Canyon's wash. And then you'll climb up Peekaboo Canyon for great views of the wall of the windows and more hoodoos before connecting back to the trail up to Bryce Point. The Peekaboo Loop is shared with horses, so be prepared for the sight and the smell of horse manure. If that's not your thing, maybe skip this trail, but I thought it was okay, to be honest. It can also be added to the Navajo Loop Trail from Sunset Point to form a mini figure 8, or Queens Garden from Sunrise Point to form the larger figure 8 trail that I'll talk about in a moment. I recommend hiking this trail in a clockwise direction, and it's a longer, more strenuous hike, so be sure to take plenty of water, have sun protection, wear bug spray in the summer to fend off the gnats. A hike in Bryce Canyon National Park that is much less popular and therefore much less crowded and equally stunning as all of them is the hike that takes you into Fairyland. This is the Fairyland Loop Trail. The hoodoos here are younger and less fully formed than those in the nearby Bryce Amphitheater, but they're no less spectacular. In fact, the hoodoos here have been described as Queens Garden on steroids. Not my description, but maybe it's fitting. It is rated as strenuous. It's long. It's 8.4 miles. 5.7 miles are actually in the canyon, and then 2.7 miles are along the Rim Trail, forming the loop. It takes about 4 to 6 hours, and it has a 1,558 feet elevation change. You can start either at Sunrise Point or at Fairyland Point. The trail lets you see hoodoos up close from many different viewpoints, and it takes you through these twisted gray bristlecone trees to pinyon pine forests. It's very cool. The trail goes down into Fairyland Canyon and then loops back along the Rim Trail. If you start at Fairyland Point, the trail descends down into Fairyland Canyon, and then it circles wide around the base of the Boat Mesa before leaving Fairyland Canyon. There are more beautiful views from the top of the ridge that separates Fairyland and Campbell Canyons. This is super amazing because you see both canyons on both sides of this narrow ridge. It's short. It's not scary. It's very cool. It's really amazing. After the trail descends into and winds through Campbell Canyon, a 200-yard side spur trail takes you to Tower Bridge. This is another of the most famous hoodoos in the park. It's a large hoodoo flanked by 2 natural arches that are set within this eroding fin of rock. Fun to look at, fun to see. And then the next half a mile is the steepest section of the trail as it climbs back up to the rim. Along the way, you'll pass Chinese Wall, which is a tall line of hoodoos that sits on a row atop a small ridge, looking like they were built there intentionally. And then from there, the trail continues to climb until you reach the rim near Sunrise Point. And then to get back to the starting point at Fairyland Point, you'll continue along the Rim Trail. Some things to be aware of. The short road to Fairyland Point is closed in winter, so you'll need to start at Sunrise Point if you're hiking this in winter. If you are, make sure that you wear micro spikes as the trail can be steep and icy and snowy. If you are hiking in the summer, doing the hike in the afternoon means that it will be hot, but the light will be behind you for most of the way, which is better for photos. The trail is well maintained. It's not used by horses, which is kind of nice. And if you don't want to do the Rim Trail portion in the summer, you could ask the shuttle driver to let you off at Fairyland Road, walk about a mile along the paved spur road to Fairyland Point, and then take the shuttle back when you get to Sunrise Point. Another option, if you don't want to drive at all, but you want to hike the full loop, you could take the shuttle to Sunrise Point and start from there. This has the disadvantage that you'll start at the easier rim trail and end with the steepest section, but it's still very doable. I will say that the parking lot at Fairyland Point is small, so if you plan to start there and want to drive, especially in the busy summer months, even though it's not as crowded as the main section of the park, it's still best to get there early. All right, we just looked at a really strenuous hike. Let's move on to a very easy hike. An easy hike in a different section of the park is the Bristlecone Loop Trail. This is at the end of the scenic road. When you get to the end of the scenic road, there's two viewpoints on each side of the parking lot. One is Rainbow Point and one is Yavimba Point, but they're all from the same area. And you'll see the trailhead for the Bristlecone Loop Trail near the parking area. It's very easy. It's a 0.8 mile loop. Doesn't take that long. It's less than 200 feet elevation change. And it's basically an easy, mostly flat stroll through bristlecone pines, blue spruce and fir trees. There are occasional views of the canyon below, but mostly it's just a walk through the forest. You'll pass bristlecone pines that are up to 1,800 years old. So it's a nice change from the other hikes that are really focused on the hoodoos. The forest is home to plenty of birds. You might see ravens, you might see stellar jays, you may see squirrels and chipmunks as well. There's also a chance to see pronghorn antelope here. It is the highest part of the park. It is at 9,100 feet, so it can be a lot cooler than the rest of the park. And it technically is open in winter, but it's often closed because of the snow in winter and even early spring. So check the weather forecast and check with the National Park Service. If you're looking for easy hikes in Bryce Canyon National Park, then another easy hike in the park is the Mossy Cave Trail. Mossy Cave is in a quiet area of the park that most people don't even know about. The trail is an easy 0.4 mile each way trail that is suitable for most levels of fitness. It doesn't have much of an elevation change. In fact, it's just 121 feet. It's just 30 to 60 minutes. It's 0.8 miles round trip. And it's one of the only hikes in the park that begins with a climb and ends with a descent, and even that's very minimal. The trailhead is just off State Route 12, and the trail goes past a few hoodoos and windows, so it gives you a chance to see some of the hoodoos up close without needing to hike below the rim of the main canyon. Near the end, you'll notice that the trail splits in two. To the right, a short trail goes into Water Canyon, to a small but lovely waterfall. This canyon is actually an irrigation ditch that was carved by the Mormon pioneers in the early 1890s. It's called the Tropic Ditch because it still feeds water to the town of Tropic below. The short trail to the left at the fork goes to Mossy Cave that gives the area its name. Mossy Cave is a sheltered overhang with water that's often dripping from the top. The area is filled with mosses in the summer and icicles in the winter, and I will say it's not that exciting, but the little waterfall and the walk there is really nice. The area has become more popular, even though most people don't know about it. The parking lot is very small, so I recommend getting there either before 10 a.m. or after 5 or 6 p.m. You cannot park along the side of the road. If the parking lot is full, you'll need to wait for someone to leave. What's my number one hike in Bryce Canyon National Park? So far, we've seen 9 amazing hikes. There's just one more left. Stay to the end to hear my absolute favorite hike in the park. But before we do, you may be thinking, these all sound amazing, but how can I coordinate all these hikes into an itinerary that makes the most sense for me and my family? The hikes have different difficulty levels. They're in different parts of the national park. They have different highlights. Can be difficult, can be tricky. This was one of the main things that I took into account when I created my Bryce Canyon National Park itineraries. In addition to all these things, timing is key, yeah? You need to coordinate to get a parking spot or with the shuttle schedule. You also want to cater to everyone in your group, which can be tricky if people have different hiking levels, different hiking preferences. So I created super detailed itineraries for 1 day and 2 days. Obviously, the longer the itinerary, the more of the hikes that you can do, but the shorter itineraries do include the most spectacular hikes that you can do in the time available. They also include different options for doing alternate hikes to the same views where that's possible, and alternatives for the same areas in the park for people who want to do these hikes and for non-hikers who want easier options. You can find the link to the Bryce Canyon itineraries page at the top of the description box below, but we can take a quick walk through right now. The itineraries all include a park overview, and then there's a detailed schedule for each day, and then all sorts of details with hiking and driving descriptions and maps, alternate activities in the same part of the park if you're traveling with people who want to do different things, tips, timings, and more. With one of these itineraries, you'll know exactly what to do and when, and how to connect them all in a way that makes the most sense. Without this itinerary, people often find themselves struggling how to coordinate their time to be in the right place at the right time, to see and do all that they want in the time that they have available. The itineraries just help take away the overwhelm and give you all the information that you need in one spot so that you don't need to worry about missing out on the highlight of the park or stress about how to put everything together that you want to do into a schedule that makes the most sense. Just follow the link in the show notes below. Now, as promised, what's my number one hike in Bryce Canyon National Park? My favorite hike in Bryce Canyon National Park is the Figure 8 Trail. This combines the Queens Garden Trail, the Navajo Loop Trail, and the Peekaboo Trail all into one epic hike. And it really is epic. However, it is rated as strenuous. It's long. It's 6.4 miles. It takes about 4 to 5 hours. It has an elevation change of 670 feet. There's a couple of places you can start, but I'm going to describe it as starting at Sunrise Point because this has the best views. I highly recommend it if you have the energy. So it starts with the Queens Garden section. From Sunrise Point, you'll head down the wide, not too steep trail in the canyon. There's great views of hoodoos and ridges in the canyon. And then it heads down a series of wide switchbacks, passes through 3 tunnels that are cut into the sandstone fins across the trail. And then you'll get to the Queen's Garden at the bottom of the canyon, which is home to the eponymous Queen Victoria hoodoo. After finding the hoodoo that kind of looks like Queen Victoria standing in profile on the top of the pedestal, then take the main trail, continue along the floor of the canyon, through some pine trees and past more hoodoos. You'll come to the junction with the Peekaboo Trail on your left. This is another loop that forms the second half of the Figure 8. I recommend hiking this in the clockwise direction. The trail climbs out of Bryce Amphitheatre to the top of the ridge where you can see Boat Mesa and Fairy Castle Rock and enjoy beautiful, amazing views of the hoodoos and the fins in Peekaboo Canyon. The trail then zigzags down the ridge, goes through another tunnel, and then crosses Peekaboo Canyon's wash before climbing up Peekaboo Canyon for great views of the wall of windows and more hoodoos. The trail passes directly beneath the wall of windows before climbing through a labyrinth of hoodoos and passing through yet another tunnel to the top of the ridge. You can see the cathedral on your right soon after. And then the trail descends some switchbacks to the end of the Peekaboo Loop, and then from there you'll turn left onto the Navajo Trail. Now, there are 2 different ways to do the Navajo Trail, either side of that narrow loop. They run roughly parallel to each other. The first left is the Wall Street section, and next to that on the right is the Two Bridges Trail. Most people choose to go up the Wall Street section when it's open, as this has the most dramatic switchbacks. However, the Two Bridges Trail also has some steep and narrow switchbacks and has the best view in the park of the Thor's Hammer hoodoo. You'll arrive back at the Rim at Sunset Point, where you can complete the full Figure 8 loop along the Rim Trail back to Sunrise Point, or you can just hop on the shuttle and skip that last little part if you're done. Some things to keep in mind: the Wall Street section is closed in winter, so the Two Bridges is the only option then. If Wall Street is open, I do recommend going up that, but If you get to the top, then I think it's worth going down the Two Bridges Trail just for a little bit before the switchbacks, because then you can see the Thor's Hammer hoodoo, which is very cool. Keep in mind also that the Peekaboo Loop is shared with horses, so you will need to deal with the horse manure and the smell of that. It's not too bad. If you want help planning your trip, check the links in the description box below. There's a bunch of planning and booking resources that you can use to plan and book your trip. And keep watching my videos to get even more help so that you can have the best national park vacation ever. And if you want to get notified about the next episode, subscribe and click below.